tomorrow, that would have been our planned timing to have a conference on wider contextualized biblical spirituality. Johnson Thomas Kuti and myself, we were discussing about having a conference. He was persuading me to have some kind of conference, and then we were thinking about what would be the theme. And then yeah, ECC has the founder has a very keen interest about the text and the context. That is the context that is of the Indian realia and also the Asian realia. And he was a great theologian, and he has written so much, but much more than what he has done is through the activities. We have Indian School of Ecumenical Theology, where we have very prominent theologians like Swaras Prabhu, and then another Jesuit professor who was here, Samuel Ryan, as the director for many years. So they were piloting. So we thought of having an important discussion on Bible, that is the text, and also the context. So that is what I thought of. We were planning for this conference, and thank you so much. We were very happy that many have responded, and I am sure that our gang will be becoming more and more. So first of all, welcome to this conference. So as we were planning, and then we also very prominent theologian, and also our own friend and an activist. We incorporated Reverend Dr. Jayachitra, who is a very close friend of all of us, and then her dynamism. So I think she has also given impetus to this movement. And just like every beginning, it is a small, we have maybe around, already there are 30 people. So this small beginning, I am sure that, you know, we can be a great movement. So welcome again. And as I was reflecting about this text and the context, so it is said that, you know, Christianity in India was initiated by Saint Thomas the Apostle. So that is in the very beginning of the apostolic community, one among them who went far beyond the Roman Byzantine empires outside because of his Christ experience, who was called by the Lord himself and to put his finger on the wounds. So that, I think he exclaimed that, my Lord and my God. So that deeper experience of Christ made him to travel far and came to this country. And it is said that, though we don't have much more deeper historical documentation, we see that the Hindu cultural items were incorporated along with the Christian faith. Something like that, you know, the marriage ceremonies where, you know, the pupil tree or banyan tree leaf on which we have added, Christians have added 21 dots, the cross. So that way, and then also the death ceremonies, the birth ceremonies, and that way, lots of Indian ideals, rituals, they have been incorporated. Then also we see that historically looking at it, there is the migration from Thomas of Cana, and then the Syriac tradition has come, and that Syriac tradition continued till the 16th century. Then we have the Portuguese, and the Portuguese missionaries came, and then they wanted to impose their own ideals, and then so that became a point of collision. And we see that the revolt, the division, and another group is separated into two. The split in the Christian community, and then we see that the more and more divisions. Later, we also see that the arrival of Swedenborg there in Tranquebar, that is in 1706. And I was fortunate to go to the place where his church and this community. And then almost 100 years later, we have William Carey and Marshman and the others. So they were, so we have the Protestant, what we say that, the other Reformed churches, Christianity here. And we also see that because of the influence of them, fighting against the injustice, and then the social discrimination. And though the Christians, the original Christians from the St. Thomas traditions, it was said that, critically, that they have kept their faith under the bushel, so they were not missionary, so they, because of the social standards. And so we have to self-criticize the way we have not propagated the witness, the Christian community. Then we could also see that the Baptist, the Presbyterian missionaries from the United States, and then the Pentecostal movements. So we as Christians, I think around 3% of Christians in India now, and this is also a big number. And how we are witnessing Christ and also his message. It is very important to have the text and the context. And what is this context? The context of Asia is really multifarious, and how we will be able to understand the Christ message through the context. And I think this is very important. We also have so much of criticism that, we are all aliens. We don't take so much of the Indian realia within us. So that I think it is a critical remark which given by Mahatma Gandhi onwards, who said that, I love Christ, but I hate the Christians. And why he was saying that, the ideal of Christianity was not that to be represented by the Christians. So I think this is what a large number of our Hindu and the other religious friends would be asking us, how much the Christian context we have incorporated. So this is where I think our ECC's founder, Reverend Dr. M.A. Thomas Hutton, was propagating, and he was so much integrating. He was trying his level best. So that is the special reason that he brought the Indian ecumenical theology school, Indian School of Ecumenical Theology. And this is the interest the ECC has to propagate, that, the text and the context, the complementarity of the text and the context. So I also see that lots of scholars in this area. Maybe we can speak about KP Elias, then also Shantinathan Clark, and then as I said that earlier, the Samuel Ryan, Swaras Prabhu, and then many others. I don't, since I am not from the biblical field, you will be knowing much more. So I think one of the contexts which was really touching to me is that of the Guru. Because in the Indian tradition, we say that you are not going to listen. So in the North India, if you ask anybody, "Hum darshan ke liye," so you are going to in the presence of a guru, a master, and guru is something very important. And then that is lots of shallow gurus, but we have a Sanatana Sadguru, a guru who has given his life, and then through the death and resurrection he has shown to us. And the meaning of guru is that, someone, gu and ru, the someone who is dispelling the darkness, and the darkness of the sinfulness and the darkness of the ignorance. And then there are various ways we will be able to explain about this Guru. So this is just one of the context I would say that, so presenting or witnessing Jesus as the Guru. So we have the preaching by the first disciples, that is the kerygma, and that kerygma we see later as the gospel, that is, after years. And then we also see that the great tradition from Saint John the Evangelist, how he was capable of taking from the Greek philosophy that the logos. So that then also we have Saint Paul. Saint Paul was living just like a stoic philosopher. He was walking everywhere, and then living very simply, and he has incorporated so much of the Greek philosophical tradition, the Roman jurisprudence, and the epistles he has written is very deep theological parlance, and these theological parlance give us always an interpretative hermeneutical context. So therefore, as we are here today, we are only we have been now into 35 members, but we have also a core group, and I think that this is the need of the time, how we are capable of transmitting the context and interpreting. There are also various other issues. I am not just going to elaborate on that, which I am sure that each and everyone, and probably Reverend Dr. Johnson Thomas Kutty will be able to give to us when he is presenting the first presentation, and then maybe you could clarify through the discussion where Reverend Dr. Jayachitra will be the moderator. So that way, and then there are enough time for us to discuss, and then how we can, whether it will be possible for us to organize a within this month, or maybe five people, or 2 people each, if it is possible, that we can present, and for maybe 5 days, which we can select. We can also think which are the possible days, and also the timing, and then you can present it with the PowerPoint presentations, and then maybe within a month or 2, we can give the full paper, which we can print it out maybe by the end of this year, so that this is not only an exercise in simply lecturing, but also we are coming out with the concrete actions, and then how these spiritual traditions which we are discussing, how it will be possible for us to transmit where we are in our own context. So we have a theoretical, then also we will have a practical, which together will be a complementary approach, and this small beginning, as in German they say that the alle Anfang sind schwer. That means every beginning is very difficult, and we have we started, and then this small beginning will become like maybe Kaveri, Godavari, and Ganga, Brahmaputra. So with these remarks, I would invite Johnson Thomas Kutty to present, and then later we can have the discussion under the leadership of Dr. Jayachitra.
So good evening, dear friends. I greet you all, and especially I am very much thankful to the Ecumenical Christian Center for taking this wonderful, attempt. And my special thanks goes to Pastor Matthew Chandran Gunnel and Dr. Jayachitra Ledda and our friend Minlun and many others who are coming together to make this conference a grand success. So today what I am going to speak in line with what we have heard from Father Matthew Chandran Gunnel, that how a wider contextualized biblical spirituality is possible in India and beyond. Based on that topic, that is the umbrella topic, today I am going to discuss something about a wider contextualized Johannine spirituality. Wider contextualized Johannine spirituality. So before I go to that, I would like to read the concept paper so that you may be well aware what is happening here. Our attempt here is to interpret the Christian scriptures from multiple vantage points and to suggest a new paradigm for Christian spirituality in the contemporary Indian context. We aim to answer the following questions, as our friend Minlung has already presented before you. How can we conceptualize and interpret the Christian scriptures for a borderless spiritual formation and execution? How biblical spirituality crosses the human-made boundaries like caste, color, ethnicity, gender, denomination, religion, and others. Can we understand biblical spirituality above and beyond denominational and religious boundaries? How Bible can be used as a paradigm to cross the traditional boundary, create contextual and ideological constellations, build dialogical relationships, incorporate relevant Indian categories, and rhetorize the discourse toward a third space? Answering these questions are important in the process of searching for a new spiritual development. The existent notions of spirituality and biblical interpretations lag behind in making inclusive and accommodative aspects of the Indian multi-religious, multicultural, and pluralistic context. The prevailing interpretations of biblical spirituality, with their exclusive and parochial tendencies and approaches, do not have the potential to make a wider impact in the contemporary context of our country, especially the nation of India. Often biblical interpretations introduced to the Indian context are distant from the Indian cultural heritage and the message of Christ needed to be incarnated into our ethos, imbibing from the wealth of our traditions, such as the concept of Guru, as our respected Father Matthew Chandran Gunnel already indicated. Therefore, interpretations should employ dynamic and inclusive strategies to interlock the religious scriptures with the spiritual semantics relevant in the Indian context. In that process, the Christian scriptures in closer relationship with other religious traditions of India and the day-to-day lived experiences of the people should be clustered together as kernels to address the pathos of diverse people groups, irrespective of their ethnic, casteistic, religious, and gender backgrounds. In order to achieve this goal, an interpreter of the Bible, first of all, should cross the traditional hermeneutical strategies. Moving from exclusive and ecclesiastical interpretations to inclusive and intertextual interpretations, creating constellations of ideas between the biblical worldview and the Indian worldview might help interpretations in particular contexts. In a pluralistic context, building dialogical engagements with other religions and cultural aspects is both necessary and has potential to enhance the scope of the interpretative task. Furthermore, through the ways of crossing the traditional boundaries and creating ideological constellations and building dialogical relationships, the interpreter should aim to direct the Indian mind toward a third space that transforms people's spiritual aspirations and experiences. These are the ways an interpreter can rhetorize her or his interpretative discourse in context both here and now and everywhere and ever. Through all these processes, an interpreter should aim to formulate an inclusive spirituality that transcends all human-made boundaries. Today's context is wider. Wider, when I was looking at the dictionary, that means having considerable or great extent from side to side. Broad, to the full extent of opening, to the utmost or fully. These are the dictionary meanings given for the very word wider. The COVID-19 period was a period without any boundaries. All were affected. Many, irrespective of Americans, Asians, or Africans, were put in social isolation, quarantine, and there was a global lockdown. So the context was widened there. Okay? The Gospel of John has the capacities to address issues and concerns in a wider contextual ways. Clement of Alexandria considered, the church father Clement of Alexandria considered the Gospel of John as a spiritual gospel. Okay, that is with a purpose. Why? I'm going to discuss that hereafter. John reflects the Indian spirituality with a lot of creativity. Okay, John's spirituality is much closer to the spirituality of the Indians. But John recreates that with much creativity. Usually people say that John is more exclusive than the Synoptic Gospels. But I may say no. It is more accommodative and open-ended in many respects. I would like to highlight some of the significant aspects that we find in John's Gospel and how we can take those aspects into the Indian scenario. The first and foremost thing is, in the Indian context, in order to achieve the spiritual maturity, there are three ways: Karma Marga, Bhakti Marga, and Jnana Marga. So the three margas in Hinduism described by Bhagavad Gita goes well within the framework of John. Is that John is an all-encompassing gospel. Within the framework of John's gospel, we see the evangelist or the narrator encompasses or incorporates all these three aspects together. In John, knowing and believing always go together. Knowing is emphasized in John chapter 4:53, 6:69, 10:38, 17:8. In all these occasions, you see that either knowing precedes believing, or believing results into knowing. So knowing and believing are going together in John's Gospel. In that case, we need to understand that John has a higher priority on Jnana Marga. That means the aspects of knowing Christ, going to the core of knowing the aspects.
62417.
The second important aspect we see here is the aspect of working is also emphasized in John's Gospel. That means the aspect of karma. When we come to chapter 5:17, chapter 4:34 to 38, chapter 9:3-5, chapter 13:14, in these passages we see that Jesus is emphasizing the aspect of work. Because my Father is working, I am also working. Okay, the work of God must be revealed. As I am working, you also should work. In that sense, John's Gospel has a higher priority on work. That work goes well within the framework of salvation. So in that case, John is not only emphasizing Jnana Marga, but also emphasizing the elements of karma. The third important aspect is bhakti. That also is implemented within the framework of John. For example, discipleship, worship, belief, all these elements are incorporated. Jnana Marga leads people to attain knowledge over ignorance and to understand the truths of ultimate reality. While Karma Marga encourages people to do selfless works in the society, Bhakti Marga helps people focus on God. John emphasizes, the evangelist John emphasizes knowing, working, and devoting aspects of Christian living. Devoting aspects of Christian living in a very dynamic and in an interlocking way. In that way, John's spirituality goes well within the wider contextual realities around us. But out of these contextual realities, John is creating a third space. Okay, a much different space. The second important aspect I would like to highlight is, in John's Gospel, the aspect of following is very important. The aspect of following. Following Jesus is emphasized. Within this Gospel, we see that Jesus is a walking guru, a walking teacher, and the disciples always follow. So, disciples walk. The Gospel of John as a whole begins with Jesus' statement to Philip, "Follow me." In chapter 1:37, we see that, and in chapter 1:43. The same way, when we come to chapter 21, the last chapter, Jesus tells Peter, "Follow me," twice. So, the Gospel of John as a whole is put within the inclusio called "Follow me." So, in that case, discipleship, following, the bhakti aspect is highly emphasized within the narrative framework of John. So Jesus is a walking teacher and the disciples are always following. In that way, from the nature Jesus is speaking, the parabolic aspects, that is the way learning is taking place. That is in line with the peripatetic school of Aristotle. In peripatetic school of Aristotle, Aristotle is walking, the disciples are following. In that process, what is happening? Learning is taking place. When we come to the Asian context, Confucius was a walking teacher. Confucius was a walking teacher and the disciples were always following him. So he is considered as a Mahakulapati, a great teacher. The same way when we come to the Hindu traditions, Dronacharya. Dronacharya of Drona Parva in Mahabharata was a teacher of both the Pandavas and the Kauravas. So when we look at the stories within Mahabharata, we see that Dronacharya was always a walking teacher. The disciples were following him, and on the way, okay, the martial arts and various other learnings were taking place. Again, when we come to Sikhism, the Punjabi word Sikh means teacher. We know that when we study the history of Sikhism, 10 gurus, after the 10 gurus, the final guru was the Guru Granth Sahib. So is that the aspect of guru is highly emphasized even in Sikhism. Almost all the religions emphasize that. The Johannine traditions comes within that framework. Jesus goes well with the guru traditions of the East in John's Gospel. So there we can learn that Jesus was a highly motivative spiritual teacher. In that way, the spiritual lessons were learned around or circumscribed around the teachings, lifestyle, the public ministry, as well as the private ministry of Jesus. Again, when we come to the signs of Jesus, in John's Gospel, we see that Jesus performs many signs. When we come to chapter 2, verses 1 to 11, Jesus performs the first sign, turning water into wine. And in chapter 4, 46 till 54, we see the second. 5, 1 to 18, we see the third. And the 6, 1 to 15, we see the fourth. 6, 16 till 21, we see the fifth. 9, 1 to 41, we see the sixth. And 11, 1 to 54, the seventh. The seventh sign motif is very important. So how the synoptic miracles are different from the Johannine signs. In synoptic traditions, okay, before performing a miracle, Jesus always inquires because the people who comes, okay, do you believe? Faith was a prerequisite in synoptic gospels. But in John's gospel, all the signs led people to faith in Jesus. In that way, in John's gospel, we see that open-endedness. That works well within the Asian traditions. Okay, in that case, the Johannine traditions goes well even when he talks about the miraculous activities of Jesus. In that way, the Johannine signs are having more potential to lead people toward a matured spirituality, a matured, okay, spiritual, okay, enhancement. Again, when we come to the Johannine traditions, Jesus says the I am sayings, the 7 I am sayings. In these I am sayings, we see that action-orientedness is the most important thing. Okay, both the material and the spiritual aspects are incorporated within John's I am sayings. So when Jesus says that I am the bread of life, when he says after he feeds 5,000 people with the physical bread, okay, the physical element is not, okay, abnegated within that process. Okay, the material element emphasized, then Jesus speaks about the spiritual aspects. Even when he talks about the water, I am the living water. So what is happening there? In the context of a woman fetching physical water from the well of Jacob, Jesus is introducing himself as the spiritual water from heaven. So that aspect of, okay, interconnectedness is brought into the fore. The riddle of word and act is brought to the foreground through the I am sayings of Jesus. The one who is able to feed 5,000 people with the physical bread is the spiritual bread from heaven. The one who is able to give sight to a blind person is the light from heaven. The one who is able to save a person, the Samaritan woman or the blind man, Okay, anybody within the Johannine framework of characters, okay, to whom Jesus is a spiritual shepherd from heaven. So is that all the I am sayings are action oriented? It is not simply utterances. Okay, we see within the Johannine I am sayings, but rather Jesus is speaking spirituality. What kind of a spirituality Jesus is expecting from people? Jesus is not expecting a spirituality that is merely vocal oriented or speech oriented or merely a kind of utterance oriented. As we see in today's spiritual world, people are too much vocal oriented, not action oriented. But in Jesus, I am saying we see that speeches and actions are both in a complementary form. In that way, Jesus is becoming a great rhetorician, a great speaker. So according to ancient rhetorical standards, the speaker is supposed to prove his speech through action. That is happening in Jesus, I am sayings. Okay, that has much power. Even in the Eastern context, we know that the person who speaks too much without proving, we won't, okay, consider him with great regard. So Jesus functions as a great paradigm for us. A person who walks his talks. That is the most important paradigm that we can show to the people, especially in the Eastern spiritual realia. Again, when we take the Johannine characters, how they go within the Asian or Indian, okay, dynamisms. For example, Indian or a Nepali reader can easily identify Nicodemus with a Brahmin Hindu or a Buddhist who seeks to understand God. Is that the mannerisms, the characterial devices, and various other elements we see in Nicodemus, okay, look alike a Brahmin Hindu who is coming either from Nepal or from India, or a Buddhist who is seeking to understand God, okay, and the potential of God. So such an image is created through the story of Nicodemus in chapter 3. And again, when we come to the Samaritan woman, we can identify her with a lower caste woman. So Jesus is speaking to her about spirituality. Okay, so in that case, while Jesus was implementing the principles of spirituality, his spiritual, okay, teachings were not restricted within the Jewish boundaries. So in that case, he was going beyond and above, okay, the expected Jewish spiritual boundaries. In that way, he was going beyond the race, beyond the caste, beyond the gender, and beyond exceptions we make within the society. Again, when we come to John chapter 1, we see Nathanael. You know that Nathanael was sitting under the fig tree. So according to Jewish understanding, usually the Jewish men sit under fig tree to read the law. So what is happening while Nicodemus was sitting under the fig tree? Jesus is identifying him, Jesus is noticing him. Not only that, Nicodemus is coming to a higher understanding about Jesus. You are the Son of God, you are the King of Israel. That is a great enlightenment. It is just like Sri Buddha was sitting under the Bodhi tree and getting a great enlightenment. We see here Nicodemus is getting, Nathanael is getting enlightenment, okay, while he was reading the Torah. Maybe he would have been reading about the coming Messiah, whom he identified in the person and work of Jesus. Okay, that is very marvelous. So in that case, Johannine spirituality okay, is much closer to the Indian spirituality, searching for something. That is what Buddha was doing, searching for something. That is what all the Indians are doing. The same is happening in the life of Nathaniel, in the life of Thomas, in the life of Nicodemus, in the life of the Samaritan woman. They were all searching for something. Finally, they were able to found those things out. In that case, Indian spirituality and the Johannine spirituality go well together. So Thomas who doubts represent all the argumentative Indians. So within the Johannine narrative framework, we see Thomas in 4 places: in chapter 11:16, chapter 14:5, chapter 20:24 to 28, and in chapter 21 verse 2. In all the places we see that Thomas is an odd person among the 12 disciples. So in that case, what we need to understand about Thomas? Thomas was always argumentative. Okay, it is just like a book was written about an argumentative Indian. So here we see Thomas, an argumentative person. Again, when we read the many other stories in John's Gospel, the invalid and the man born blind in chapter 9, they look like the poor beggars around the temples, gurudwaras, churches and pagodas in the South Asian context. So they are getting divine insights and a divine understanding. In that way, they are transformed, coming to a new spirituality. So when we come to chapter 9, we know that the blind man, he is following Jesus. He is step by step understanding Jesus. First of all, he understands Jesus as a man, anthropos. Secondly, he understands Jesus as a prophet. Thirdly, he understands Jesus as the Messiah. Fourthly, he understands Jesus as Lord. And finally, he worships Jesus. In that way, knowing and worshipping, that means Jnana Marga and Bhakti Marga are embedded together within the spirituality of, okay, the blind man turned healed in John chapter 9. So another important aspect we have to take about is mysticism. Johannine spirituality goes well within the Indian spirituality. One element we see common in Johannine spirituality and Indian spirituality is the element of mysticism. That is common. So is that when we think about Johannine mysticism, what are the elements we see? Union between God and humans. One element. All that is mine is yours, yours mine. They may be one as we are one. I in them and you in me. So these are the mystical elements embedded within the Johannine narrative framework that goes well within the Indian spiritual aspects. So you know that as a gospel of love and belief, again the mystical elements are incorporated. Again the language of fellowship, to be born of God, children of God. These elements are prioritized in John's Gospel. Again, the contemplative language, knowing, seeing, and believing. Again, the imagery is used. For example, light, wine, and branches. Again, we see the communion among Father, Son, Holy Spirit, and believers. All these things together, bringing the oneness aspect within the narrative framework of John's Gospel. This oneness aspect is part and parcel of the Indian spirituality, the Hindu spirituality especially. For example, if you take Shankara's Advaita philosophy, according to Shankara, there is only one reality, the ultimate reality, that is Brahman. Okay, there is Brahman is without a second. That means he is the ultimate reality. But when we come to Ramanuja's philosophy, so he is suggesting a Vishishtadvaita philosophy. So according to Shankara's philosophy, Brahman is without any attributes because he is Nirguna Brahma. But when we come to Ramanuja's philosophy, he is suggesting a Vishishtadvaita philosophy. So according to him, there is individual relationship possible between God and human beings. But according to Shankara philosophy, that is not possible because God is Nirguna Brahma. So in that case, when it comes to Ramanuja's philosophy, God is not simply Nirguna, he is Saguna Brahma. So that is why he is prioritizing the aspect of bhakti within the tradition. And in that way, he is foregrounding his aspects different from Shankara's philosophy. Come to John. But John is not non-dualistic, but dualistic. So that John is showing several elements when he is showing his spiritual attributes. John goes much closer to Shankara in one sense. How? God is the absolute according to John's understanding. John goes closer to Ramanuja in another sense. How? A devotee can go and show his bhakti, the ultimate reality. So is that John has Advaita elements and Vishishta Advaita elements, but still John is none of these. John is dualistic. John is dualistic. In that sense, John is dualistic not in the sense of the Zoroastrian, okay, pure dualism, but John is going much closer to Madhava's philosophy, the third great school of philosophy in India. In that way, John's ultimate philosophy is qualified dualistic aspect. You see, my dear friends, how John can be connected to various schools of thought in India. Okay, John is much closer to our spirituality. In that case, John's spirituality is borderless. John's spirituality is all-encompassing. John's spirituality is wider. John's spirituality, okay, can be presented in relation to many aspects. But as I am going to put an end to my speech, I would like to highlight some more things. The aspect of suffering is very important in John's Gospel. As the Asian communities are suffering, the Johannine community was a suffering community. So in the midst of suffering, they were showing their spirituality. That is the most important thing that we see common between Johannine community and the Indian Christian community. In the midst of pain, in the midst of sufferings, in the midst of persecutions, in the midst of various dukkha, in the language of Sri Buddha, that they are exemplifying their spirituality. Another thing is, John's ultimate intention was, okay, through Jesus, we see that Jesus was showing his concern toward the poor, the marginalized, and the ostracized. In today's Indian context, church is focusing more on these groups of people. In John's Gospel, we see that women are narrated with respect. In none of the other Gospels, we see that women are portrayed with respect, as we see in John's Gospel. Jesus' mother is coming 2 times in John's Gospel, right at the outset of his public ministry, right toward the end of his public ministry, in chapter 2 and chapter 19. Again, we see the 2 sisters of Lazarus, Mary and Martha of Bethany. Again, we see in chapter 12, Mary is anointing the feet of Jesus, and she is placed over against Judas Iscariot. And again, we see Mary Magdalene, who is considered as the Apostola Apostolorum, the apostle to the apostles. She is coming in chapter 20. In that way, women are presented with much respect in John's Gospel. So in that case, women's spirituality is brought to the foreground in John's Gospel. That goes well with the Indian women's movement that is coming up and emerging. Another significant thing is dialogue. John is a gospel of dialogue. So in that case, what we see, John's dialogue is highlighted. John is argumentative, interactional, and dialogical. The aspects of poor, Dalits, and tribals are also coming to the foreground through John's narrative framework. The aspect of hospitality, that is one of the characteristic element of the Indian community. And both the private and public, mission and spirituality. In John's Gospel. So in that case, what I'm going to conclude, there are several riddles we see in John's Gospel. John is mystical, at the same time dualistic. John is Advaitic, at the same time Dvaitic. John is Indianizing, because Sadhu Sundar Singh was taking the Gospel of John as the prima factor in order to spread his ideology, gospel in the Indian cup. At the same time, John is indigenizing. John is local, at the same time universal. John is divine, but at the same time, it comes core to the heart of the human elements. So spirituality takes into consideration everything around us. That is what John teaches us. Spirituality, should be connected, in relation to the various religious, cultural, political, and the human suffering, the Dalit suffering, women suffering, the tribal suffering, and various other suffering aspects, the element of dukkha. So everything is incorporated together within the narrative framework of the fourth gospel. That may be the reason why the Church Father Clement of Alexandria rightly nomenclatured it as the spiritual gospel. That may be the reason why B.F. Westcott, one of the British theologians, told, so far no good commentary on John's gospel. The best commentary on John's gospel would come from the mind of an Indian. So my dear friends, in that case, Johannine spirituality and Indian spirituality go hand in hand. They go together. So in this context, we have to take the Johannine spirituality into serious consideration for our brainstorming, for our thinking patterns, for our spiritual nourishment and development. May God bless us.
Thank you so much, sir, for the wonderful presentations relating Johannine spirituality and Indian spirituality. It was very insightful. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
I'm sure many of us would like to share our views or would like to raise questions from the presentations. So I request Dr. Jayachitra to, take up these sessions. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Thomas Kutty, for challenging our minds this evening. And you have given a lot of ideas as the inaugural presentation. And you have challenged us that the best commentary on John should come from Indian minds. It's really inspiring and motivating one. I don't attempt to recapitulate all that Dr. Thomas Kutty has said. It will be a sheer waste of time. We all have listened to him, and I'm sure we all can actively participate in the conversation. please start talking or raising your question or share your comment. In case after you have started talking, you realize that someone else has started speaking, please hold on till the other person finishes. And let's speak briefly so that all of us will have time to chip in all our ideas. So who would like to start?
May I interrupt once, ma'am? So,
Yes.
instead of disturbing, one another, anyone
Okay.
who wishes to share, can you please do the, reactions? If you see your, the bottom part of your screen, you will see reactions.
Okay.
If you click that, there are thumb buttons and then kind of like clap buttons. So if you may just press it on that, anyone who wishes to share, we will unmute your system so that everybody will be able to listen what you are saying.
Okay. Okay, we'll follow that. Yeah. And shall I request all those who are in the meeting to start your videos? It's good that we all show our faces. Yes, that's great.
Is there anyone? Or else we will unmute
Yes.
all
I
once.
say
Or anyone who is
Father
ready.
Chandrakunar.
Father Matthew.
Yes,
Million, okay. Yes.
Okay, Father, yes.
Thank you, Dr. Jayachitra, for presiding over and then as moderator. And I want to thank Reverend Dr. Johnson Thomas Kutty for this stunning presentation. And I would say that, you know, you have done a great deal of thought, bringing out the Yavanan tradition. And you are saying that the great Indian Milun, I think some background music is there. You should, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Please keep your mobiles in.
no, Milun, you have to mute everything. Okay.
Yes, yes, Father.
So this, sorry for the disturbance. And then I think that Dr. Johnson Thomas Kutty would be the better person to start that, initiate. Maybe we can together have a collective John's interpretation or gospel from this Indian hermeneutical interpretation. So maybe as you have gone deeper into these thought processes, we can request you to take the initiative. So my question would be the Advaita, Dvaita, Vishishta Advaita, and then various other philosophical traditions you are presenting. But it seems that, you know, these are from the Brahminical high caste, and then an imposing theological parlance or, you know, discourse. What about the tribal and the Dalit and the feminist, which were really under oppression, marginalized, and then how you will see this from this Johannine perspective? I know that, you know, you have just started and we didn't have enough time to go on deeper into it, but you can give me a kind of, maybe to all of us, that, you know, how these different perspectives could also be incorporated. Otherwise, we will be simply seeing that, you know, again, another Brahminical oppressive mentality, while most of the Christians, they are from this oppressed minority.
Yes, thank you, Father. Just to highlight that point, you have mentioned Nicodemus as Brahminical and Samaritan woman as lower caste. If you highlight explanation, perhaps we would find answer to that. I saw two more hands. We will take those two questions before Dr. Thomas Kutty responds.
So
Sorry,
then
yeah.
I will unmute Johnson, please.
No,
Johnson.
before Dr. Johnson.
No, Johnson
two-
Rajendran. Yeah,
Yes,
Johnson
yes.
Rajendran. Another
Yes.
Johnson. Sure, please.
Yes. Right.
Good evening, sir. Thank you so much, sir, for the wonderful presentation. And I thoroughly enjoyed presentation throughout. I like the way that you explained Johannine literature in the universalistic context, even in Indian context, with Vedic, Advaitic, and various contexts. I'm just quite interested in how does it fit into the context of Islamic tradition, and which is very much prevalent even in India, even in Asian context, even and beyond.
Okay, sir, we go to the next person. Galaxy Z7, right? The name is not there. Galaxy Z7 Pro. Yeah, you may raise your question now, please.
Yeah, it is galaxies of people.
Oh,
Oh, Reverend Christie. Yes.
yes.
Dr. Thomas Kuti, thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
Yeah. You were speaking about this
You need to unmute. I'll unmute. Yes. Yes. Please repeat, Christy.
Seems his signal
Hello?
is poor.
Yes.
Hello.
Yes. I can hear
Yeah.
you.
Okay. So how do you see the politics of this inclusion in a country like India, where seclusion and exclusion is inherent in the politics of inclusion? First thing. Secondly, again, Indian and Johannine. How do you define what Indian is and what is Johannine? Because within Johannine, we see another community. Within the Johannine. Johannine is not an individual community. Again, Johannine is a community of communities. So Indian is also community of communities. So which is your lens when you speak Indian and Johannine? And
Okay.
thirdly, when you talk about these three margas, okay, from the Dalit perspective, the knowing that you speak about knowing, whereas when we read from the Hebrew text, knowing is not knowledge. Knowing is more of the intimacy that we share. And predominantly the knowing, the knowledge is being captured by the Indian community. And how could a way of Chandran Kunil has pointed out is Brahminical in nature. So how could these margas pave way for salvation from the so-called depressed communities?
Okay. So we have three persons' questions to Dr. Thomas Kuti. Now we'll ask him. Would you like to respond now?
Yes. So thank you so much for all these wonderful questions. And as I have already told you, you know that while I was framing my paper, mostly it came from the Brahminical tradition. But if I go and write another paper, definitely I can write from the subaltern perspective. That is why I usually tell that John's Gospel is accommodative and elastic. Okay, to where we pull it comes. So that is the nature of John's Gospel. For example, I was trying to write some blogs from the Johannine perspective in relation to the northeastern tribal realities. For example, in the Avo context, God is considered as Lijaba. Lijaba means good God. Okay, that concept is embedded within the farewell discourse of the Gospel of John. More than that, the I am sayings also reflect things in that sort. Again, Jesus as a rooster. Okay, that is the tribal theologians usually take the concept of rooster as a symbol of sacrifice. So that aspect can be well incorporated within the narrative framework of John. Again, when we think about the marginalized communities, the theology of incarnation, God living among the people, associating with the people, the one who is crossing the traditional boundaries and going to the Samaritan village, the one who is going to a person who was about 38 long years in quarantine in John chapter 5. And Jesus as a person who is going to a blind person in chapter 9. So in these cases, especially when we come to chapter 12, we see that even the Greeks are coming, the Gentiles are coming to meet Jesus. In that case, John's gospel is accommodating to every levels of people. As Dr. Chitra already told, Nicodemus looks like a Brahmanical person. On the other side, we see Samaritan woman who looks like a lower caste woman. Similar kinds of stories we see in Buddhism. Ananda Bhikshu, one of the disciples of Buddha, is asking water to a Chandala woman. That tradition is there from 3rd century onward. So in that case, is that John's gospel is much accommodating and elastic. And somebody was asking, I think that Reverend Johnson was asking about Islamic tradition and mysticism. Of course, Sufism is one of the best examples. Its mysticism goes well in line with the Johannine, mystical aspects. And another important aspect in relation to the lower caste communities, especially the Dalits, the marginalized, the women, the ostracized communities, the incarnational theology is the best theology. A God who tabernacles and dwells among us. And another important aspect we see in John chapter 13, Jesus is washing the feet of the disciples. So is that there we see that Jesus, 3 aspects are very important. The first aspect is Jesus being is emphasized. Jesus being as God and Lord. The second element is Jesus becoming. Okay? That means he is standing from the table. So according to Jewish understanding, sitting behind the table shows authority. But Jesus stands up from the table. Okay? And he is putting on a towel and trying to wash the feet of the disciples. That shows Jesus is transferring himself from the nature of being to becoming. And later on, at the third level, Jesus is emphasizing the aspect of doing. As I am doing, you also should do. So that the message is going in line with the Indian spirituality in multifarious ways. And again, when it comes to the politics, as I have already told you, when we talk about the politics, the Johannine spirituality is well in line with the, what is that called? Walking the talk. The I am sayings are reflective of Jesus walking the talk element. For example, the one who is feeding the 5,000 is the bread from heaven. The one who is opening the eyes of a blind man, giving physical sight to a person, is the light from heaven. The one who is turning water into wine in Cana in Galilee is the true wine. The one who is safeguarding a Samaritan woman, safeguarding a blind person, is the good shepherd. So Jesus was not simply airing rostrums, but rather he was exemplifying his words through action. That is what we need to see materialized in the Indian political scenario. Okay, Indian politicians are giving a lot of hope, but finally they are not fulfilling. So in that case, I was trying to see some equations, those who were walking the talk in the Asian context. I may take Mahatma Gandhi as an example. I may take two significant women from India, Mother Teresa. I may take even Pandita Ramabai. I may take a woman from Pakistan, Malala. I may take a woman from Myanmar, the person who recently got the, what is that called, the Nobel Prize. So to such kind of, okay, walking the talk element should come in the Indian political scenario. And as you know, John's Gospel is full of imageries, mysticisms, and various other elements. In several ways, we can attune the Johannine aspects to the Indian context. When it comes to another occasions, I can answer all those things. Okay, I think that it may take a lot of time. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Thomas Kuti, for that explanation. The challenge for us as Asian interpreters is how we consciously make efforts to read the text from a political vantage point of inclusion. So the challenge remains us. We can think about how in the forthcoming papers we can include that. Now we have Dr. P.G. George and Reverend Sukumar. Then we will see one more question we can take. So over to Dr. P.G. George.
Thank you, Ms. Kuti.
Thank you, sir.
For the beautiful presentation, and you try to reach to many dimensions to include that within your. But you know, I would like to have you heard one is the Trinitarian Father, and secondly, and holiness aspect in which is very much Indian, because we can talk about unity without talking about holiness, and you can talk about holiness without talking about unity. So I think Bishop Albright should be very specific. And so here in India, what we need is unity and holiness together. That is where the ecclesia is. I think Johannine community was talk and you talk about that integrity was presented in a very beautiful way. Logos is taking shape and moving in every side of the Palestine. Not only that, he is going beyond. And you well explained that. Thank you.
Welcome, sir.
Reverend Sukumar.
Sir, Tom Johnson Thomas Kuti, sir.
Yes.
Thank you so much for your
Welcome.
fantastic presentation. I really enjoyed your presentation. I'm curious to know about the elements of mysticism, especially when you talk about Johannine mysticism. And I'm a student of history, sir. So when we look at early Christian mysticism, we see diversity of different pluralistic traditions. When you compare with the Indian mystics or mysticism, so how do you look at that mystic experiences in the present contemporary context? Thank you so much, sir.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, we'll have one more question. Is anybody interested to raise a question? Yes. Father Lawrence Kulas. Lalu Kulas. Yeah, I'll unmute. No, I think.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes.
So, yeah. Thank Dr. Johnson for this beautiful presentation. How I understood the meaning of why contextualized spirituality. So when I sent my paper to you, you were commenting. The paper is okay, but the concept of wide contextualized must be incorporated into it. So that's very good. Then I don't have a big question to ask, but you were talking about a good commentary on Johannine Gospel must come from Indian scholars. I think there is a good commentary by Sister Vandana, a Brahmin convert from West Bengal. And I think this commentary on John is more of a contextualized commentary. That's what just I wanted to tell you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Over to Dr. Thomas Kuti.
So thank you, Dr. Chitra, and the respected fathers and people, those who raised significant questions. So you know that within an 1 hour paper, we cannot incorporate everything. But I was just trying to bring multifarious elements to be incorporated to give a flavor. So in that case, I know that this paper is not complete in itself. But of course, when we talk about in line with the Father P.G. George's question with regard to Trinitarianism in John's Gospel, of course, we know that in John's Gospel, Father, God stands out completely as a person, just like Jesus is being a complete person. The same way is that when we think about Johannine pneumatology. So Johannine pneumatology, in which you see that the aspect of Parakletos, another comforter, another teacher, or another advocate. So there we see that personification of the Holy Spirit comes into its complete form. It is not like the other Gospels. So in that way, 3 individual persons, but they are mystically in union. Okay, so in that way, Johannine Trinitarian theology is more stronger, I may argue. So why John is more stronger is because it is written on a later stage. Some scholars argue that Pauline was first, Synoptic Gospels theology is more antique, earlier than Pauline. Then finally the Johannine, the most developed theology. So I am having such kind of an argument. So when it comes to the holiness aspects, of course, the holiness aspects goes well with the mystical union reality within the narrative framework. God is holy. That element is coming completely from the foreground because the pre-incarnational, incarnational theology and everything is flourishing from the world from above. That itself shows the holiness aspects. So it is entirely different from the synoptic eschatology. Synoptic eschatology is more a kind of horizontal eschatology. The conflict in synoptic eschatology is between this age and the coming age. But when it comes to Johannine eschatology, it is more vertical. The conflict is not between this age and the coming age, but rather the world from above and the world from below. So in that way, the holiness aspects are coming more in a realized way from within the narrative framework of John's Gospel. So in that way, holiness aspect is always embedded everywhere. That is the beauty of John's Gospel. So at the same time, we can argue John's Gospel completely from the secular point of view. That is also there. So when it comes to the mysticism from the Indian point of view, of course, Abhishektananda is one of the best example we can take. Not only Abhishektananda, but also we can go to Sadhu Sundar Singh. And of course, we can take A.J. Appaswamy's Christianity as Bhakti Marga. So these are the books we can take up with the significance for arguing for the mysticism. Of course, Dr. K. Kanagaraj. his doctoral dissertation was based on Johannine mysticism, Marhaba mysticism, that is rooted in Jewish religion. So in that case, when we connect that with the Indian mysticism, that is the difficulty. Okay, John takes elements of all the philosophical schools in India. For example, from one point of view, if we look at John's Gospel, it looks like Shankara's, okay, Advaitic philosophy. In that way, God is the ultimate. Okay, that aspect is coming. But when we look from other angle, it looks like Ramanuja's philosophy, the Vishishtadvaitic philosophical thought. But when we look at from another point of view, it looks like, what is that, Dvaitic, just like the Zoroastrian understanding of God, good and evil. But I am going much in line with Madhava's philosophy, okay, the third school of thought. In Madhava's philosophy, we see that a kind of qualified dualism. Okay, that is what John is saying. Okay, light overcomes darkness. That aspect we see in John chapter 1, verse 5. So in that case, John is more both dualistic and non-dualistic.
Okay.
So that
Can I interrupt here? Please take just 1 minute more.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, then wider context, Westcott, as Father Kulas was saying, Sister Vandana's commentary, and also Dr. Kanagaraj's commentary, and many other commentaries we are expecting in future from many people. And yeah, Johannine studies is growing in India. That is a good thing. Even Sister Dr. Chitra was organizing a conference a few months back in Bangalore. Okay, these are the new developments that is happening to learn more from the framework of John's Gospel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Thomas Kutty, for taking this much effort in short notice to present such a thought-provoking, and you have given so much information from the perspective of approaching John's Gospel from a wider contextualized biblical spirituality. As Father Chandrakunal was, at the beginning was telling us how text and context need to complement each other. It's becoming more and more evident that the interpreter plays a major role in connecting text and context. So the real challenge to us, I believe, the biblical scholars, is to make this text relevant for the present context in such a way that it makes possible that an inclusive spirituality can be made relevant to all of us. So thank you very much, Dr. Thomas Kutty, for taking us through this very Indian journey of Johannine spirituality. And I'm sure all of us would agree that it was a wonderful time of learning from you. Thank you very much. And along with the Vandana and Kanagaraj, Thomas Kutty himself is an expert in Johannine studies, and we have many other scholars in this particular Zoom meeting that they have done research on John's Gospel. So it's indeed a great time of learning from you this evening. So over to Milan or Father Chandrakunal.
Before we close this, our friend Abhi, one of our members, he texted me long time back. Since long time back, he wanted to raise a question. Shall we give him one last chance, or how do you feel? Sure. Abhi, please. Yeah, you may speak it now. You may raise your question.
Please come on video if you don't mind.
So
is it okay, Abhi?
His video is not possible. Let him just speak. Let him just speak.
Okay,
no
sure,
problem.
Sure.
Hi, Abhi, you may please, raise a question now.
Please unmute his audio.
Couldn't. I tried several times. Anyway, yeah, we are running out of out of time. So thank you so much. As I have put up in the chat box, everyone, would you please drop your email ID on the chat box so that we will send invitation for our next program to your email. I would like to request Dr. Chitra to close our program or a meeting with a word of prayer, and that could be the end of this seminar for this evening.
Let's pray. Transcendent yet eminent God, we are grateful to you for having given us this wonderful evening learning from Dr. Thomas Kuti, the possibilities of understanding spirituality from John's Gospel. God, at this time of quarantine, such opportunities to learn and to seek ways how we can ensure an inclusive community in our churches and societies, and to see how each one of us can be a source of interpretation which can link the text and the context in a way that bring inclusivity or reality in our society. Be with all of us until we meet again, and help us, O God, with the power of the Holy Spirit to seek the deeper meanings of your word. In Jesus' name we pray.
Amen.
Amen.